And the results have been even to the point of one really quick story involves our anniversary party last year. The terminal's birthday is March 14th. Anybody who recognizes those numbers knows it's Pi Day. So about 4 days before Pi Day comes up, I throw out a message that says, well, what should we do for our anniversary this year? And a couple of folks start saying, you need to do a Pi Day party. And I think in a stretch of about 45 minutes, we went from having no anniversary party whatsoever planned to having a website, a reservation list, a restaurant willing to go ahead and host the event, a vendor willing to go give coffee to us, and we had 65 people bring stuff. We had pizza pie, pear pie, apple pie, moon pies. And they came out, and it was something where at that point, I didn't really know what to expect from the community that I'd been serving. And they gave back tremendously, not just for the site, but for each other. And the only thing that was freakier was seeing our local NBC outlet show up and do a story about it. So
what does that get you?
It got us a chance to talk face to face to the folks who visit the site. It gets us a chance to go talk to the local media outlet and find out, why did you guys send this out? Was it a really slow news day? Did we really get that?
Decent exposure.
Decent exposure.
As opposed to indecent exposure, I guess.
Yeah.
Growing the audience.
And it grew the audience. Most importantly, it grew the audience, because I've gotten in this habit that I think while in advertising it may be okay to fight over advertisers, in the case of growing your community, you have to assume that you aren't reaching the entire community, and that you got to figure out ways to reach out and get people that aren't already connected with your brand or anybody else's brand. And even if it means that you bring them into the digital world, but they may not stay with you, you still helped grow the pie for more people in the community. I know, it's really, I know, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
So this idea of growing audience, I find it really interesting to think about that on both macro and micro terms. Who's the audience for your overall mission, but who's the audience for individual stories? And as you're reporting a story or working on a topic, how can you be thinking about where and when those people may or may not find what you're doing? I think the latest Pew research said that American adults have an average of 5 news sources a day. I mean, even the people who like you and like what you do are not going to see everything that you do. So it starts with making it easy to share and making what you're doing easy to pass on. But more specifically, I wonder if we could talk about what it means to grow audience and how you find people who wouldn't also find you, and how this culture of journalism that we publish, pat ourselves in the back, and move on to the next thing is just not going to cut it. Denise, you mentioned some audience growing efforts you guys are up to. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Andre's point that for him, outreach, because of what they do, they spent a lot of time on it. I think for us, outreach is one of the most important things because we are completely community powered. Nobody on staff, which is a tiny staff, is actually there to create content. We're really doing a lot of community management and kind of connecting different resources to the people who need them. So one of the things that Andre was talking about was like how, if you're spending a lot of time, then one of the questions it begs is how do you maximize that time that you have? And one thing that I would really suggest is being visible in your community. So a lot of us do work that is telecommutable, so why not become a regular somewhere, whether it's at your local library or at the coffee shop. That becomes almost a passive outreach, because as you become a regular in these places, people are more willing to approach you because they're regulars themselves and they bring kind of their own networks into it. And it's not really an active engagement in the sense that you're going up to every table and saying, here, take a zine, take a pamphlet, take a button. You're just saying, like, this is, I mean, you're just here, and you can approach them over time because you're a regular too, but it really is a way of doing more passive outreach, so it kind of is a double function. It's almost like exposure by osmosis is kind of how I think of it. But in terms of audience, we do a couple of different things. I think the one that we've stuck with the longest is we do a Facebook album digest of all of our content. So we also have a weekly digest that we send out to every person who's registered on the Rapidian. And then as well, because every single story on the Rapidian has a picture that accompanies it, we take that picture and we put it into a Facebook photo album, put a description, put a bit.ly link so people can click back to the article. But then we go in and we have the separate account. I know Facebook would not approve, but we have a separate account for the Rapidian so that we can friend everybody who is written up in the story, who's contributed to the story, perhaps through our Flickr photo bank or otherwise. And then we just tag each and every single person that we possibly can who's somehow related to the story. Because the idea is, in that way, by using social media, we're sort of infiltrating their social networks as well, so that they're getting recognition for their contribution. You know, even if they don't feel like it was significant, they're still getting recognition for their contribution, as well as their friends and their networks are seeing that as well. So that's one of our efforts that's kind of continued through this last year. And then another thing that we've done lately, which we're still sort of like seeing how effective it is, but we made these little zines, which I don't have right now on me, but I think a couple of you in the audience actually have these zines, and I think Lori's gonna hold one up, and we brought several of them if you want one. But it basically very quickly explains to people what the Rapidian is. In fact, Andre has one as well. And it's very, very graphical. It's very visual. And the idea of that was that it would, when you use visual communication, sometimes you transcend language barriers a little bit better. But also because it's so interactive, people actually keep this because they want to figure out how to refold it. They can't figure it out. And they also take it and give it to their friends. So, you know, this, in a sense, if you look at the material, it explains what the Rapidian is. It explains, you know, we're really looking for you to share your story. You see things in the neighborhoods every day that you think other people don't, that other people might miss. Please share it with us. It really, if you think about it, is pamphlet material, right? It's brochure material, but you see those trifolds sitting at the reception desk, right? You see these things, and these things can make it out to more than just reception desks. They can end up in coffee shops, bookstores, community centers, because they're interactive and they don't have that same connotation for people that a pamphlet does. It's just a different way that we're trying to do outreach and get people to know about the Rapidian, at least to look at the content, but also to consider how we can support their efforts and their passions.
You want to talk about the bus ads?
Oh,
You don't have bus ads? Was it you? Ads on city buses?
Oh, no. Okay, I know what you're talking about now.
Oh.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. So one of the ideas that we played around with, and we've sort of talked to the city transportation system about before, is our system called the Rapid, because we're Grand Rapids. They have these sort of like plastic things that hold materials, right? Like newsletters, bus schedules, that kind of stuff. But they're almost always empty. And their newsletter that they do every year, they actually do it once a year. So it's like information that's from July and it's like January, you know, so it's not really relevant. So one of the things that we've talked to them about doing before, and we're sort of like interested in seeing how it goes and the possibility for growing that as we get more content that's more diverse, is whether we can really work with the bus system, because we don't have hundreds of lines like some of the cities do, whether we can work with them so that with some of the routes that are going through specific neighborhoods, we could create print versions of the news that we already have online that are specific to the neighborhoods that the route goes through, so that people, as they're sitting on the bus, can actually look through that content and see if that's going to be useful to them. Like, they're actually getting neighborhood news while sitting on the bus. That's very specific to that bus line in particular. But that is something that could potentially work for us, but mostly because unlike, you know, cities like Chicago or San Francisco, we don't have hundreds and hundreds of bus lines.
So one of the things as we were prepping for this session that kept coming up is the idea that sometimes a traditional journalism product is not the highest good. Sometimes the most good we can do today is not writing another story. It might be having a conversation, and the conversation on its own is a product, a kind of journalism. It might be that drawing more attention to what you did yesterday that you're afraid is important and nobody saw is the highest good for how you can spend your time today. And I want to give you a couple of examples. California Watch, you guys probably know, when they did a big project on the seismic safety of public schools, made a coloring book and took it into public schools and got it distributed across the state, figuring the audience for that project, one of the audiences is the kids, and do they know what to do in their public schools in case of an earthquake? That mindset is something I'm really trying to embrace in terms of who most wants and needs this content, and are they going to find it if I do not make Herculean efforts for them to find it? Grant Barrett, who's at the Voice of San Diego, says that he considers it his job, he's the engagement editor there, and he considers it his job to find the audience. And sometimes that means great Google skills, finding a listserv and getting a story sent out on a listserv. Sometimes it just means making it real shareable. Sometimes, as with the project they did last year on a profile of an immigrant who is deaf and unable to speak, and he said, we spent 6 months on this story, this is really powerful, and we did not do it because we want to feel good about ourselves. We did it because we think the community of San Diego needs to understand what this person's perspective is, and I have not done my job if I don't make sure it gets into the hands of the people who work in social services and other people in the community who have the power to do something about the situation. He said if, identifying who most wants and who, if they didn't see this content, their lives would be worse off for it. And what does it mean to make sure that they find it? It's an interesting notion, I think, that outreach effort is sometimes the highest good. The newspaper where I work it was city budget time, and we had been working for several weeks reporting all the cuts to the transit budget in town, and people are all worked up. So when it comes to the final hearing, and a lot of people in wheelchairs are there because the disabled routes were getting cut, and emotion-charged issue in town, we took 3 weeks worth of reporting and turned it into a 2-page handout and went to the city council meeting, figuring people will be bored, waiting for their turn to talk, emotional, not necessarily with facts on the tip of their tongue to respond to, but just in general, how could you cut these things? So it turned out, and we thought, who most wants and needs this content? It's the people who are invested in it and may not have the facts otherwise easily accessible. Another thing we handed out on paper this year is in figuring out what we wanted to do for 9/11, the idea came up that we wanted to give parents a resource for how to talk to their young kids about 9/11, how much to say and how specific to be. So we did end up putting a more traditional product on our website, but the idea started as, what if we made a handout? So we did, and we made 800 copies and took them around town now this took a while, and I had a couple students helping, but really it probably took about 8 to 10 hours worth of effort overall. Had our logo on the bottom, but did not send people back to the website. The point of this flyer was not traffic to the website, it was offering a community resource. So daycare centers, the library, I was able to get in at the library because I've been working hard on a partnership there. Somebody there, by the way, they're in a really similar boat, librarians, in terms of having declining resources and need to diversify and need to meet people where they are and continue to stay relevant. So after bonding with this librarian, I can call and say, hey, can we put 50 of our flyers in the children's department at the library? And I was ready for some pushback, why in the world would you, what are you guys doing, and what do you want me to give? One person said, are you going to charge me to leave this here? Thinking we were like, I don't know, expecting her to, she thought we were going to make her pay for the flyer. And when we say no, we just really wanted to make sure that parents who aren't ever going to log on to columbiamissourian.com are going to have the information. And so the response we got was overwhelmingly positive.